We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
And looking ahead to what is next.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good morning, almost good afternoon, everyone, and welcome if you're just joining in now for our Political Healthcare Summit. My name is Claudia Chiappa. I'm a health reporter here at Politico. I'm very excited about this next panel. We're going to dive into the threat of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. AMR is, I think, undoubtedly one of the worst public health threats that we're facing right now. It kills about 35,000 people in Europe every year, over 1 million globally. And these are numbers that are set to increase. It's estimated that AMR will cause nearly 40 million deaths over the next 25 years. So it's a big threat to public health, to our economies too, with high costs to healthcare systems estimated in the billions. But despite commitments to reduce the use of antibiotics, antimicrobials, several regions are still behind in meeting their targets, including Europe. And there are still problems with the pipeline for research and development for new antibiotics. So a lot to get to. These are some of the issues we're going to talk about today, and this is a very important year for AMR. And it's also a very important week. It's AMR Awareness Week for WHO, so great timing for this. I'm going to introduce our great panelists here. We have online, we have Professor Dame Sally Davies, UK Special Envoy on Antimicrobial Resistance. Thank you for joining us. Then here with us, we have Anka Thoma, Executive Director of the European Patients Forum, Roser Dominic, Director of One Health at DG Sante, and Mark Kitzinger, President of Beam Alliance. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to dive right into it. I think there is a lot to get to, and can't wait to hear the insights that come out of this panel. I want to start with a question for Dame Sally online. Like I said earlier, this has been a big year for AMR. We had the UN General Assembly in September in New York that culminated in the UNGA Declaration that set very clear targets for cutting antibiotic use in humans, some in animals, and then deaths by AMR. We also had recently the Saudi Arabia ministerial meeting on AMR. So a lot that has happened this year. But my question for you is this all talk? Are you feeling optimistic that with these meetings, with these political commitments, will actually lead to concrete actions? And I want to ask you, because you've been in the field advocating for this and trying to raise awareness on how dangerous AMR is for years. So do you feel that, are we actually in a turning point of history against AMR?
I sincerely hope we are. And actually, I do believe we are. If you look back to the first high-level meeting in 2016, it was absolutely clear that most people had no idea what AMR was. Fast forward to this year, and the countries that spoke really did know what AMR was. Most of them had written their national action plans. The problem is only 11% of national action plans are actually funded. So we've really got to get these countries looking at the priorities of their national action plans, putting them in place, recognizing the One Health manner, and mobilizing funding. There's a lot of funding in the World Bank, in development banks and regional banks that actually can be used for AMR, but it doesn't say AMR on the package. And that's what people find difficult. They don't know where they can apply, what they can do. So we really need the World Bank leading the way, mapping what's being done, what more can be done, where to apply, and then making it easy. Actually, the ministerial meeting I've just come back from, arriving home on Sunday, was uplifting because people were beginning to talk about moving into real action. And I think that's what's needed. Stop talking, we know what to do, let's do it. One of the issues close to my heart that the UK government is pursuing is the setting up of the Independent Science Panel, and that needs to be done by next year, and the consultations led by the quadripartite. We hope that that will be in Kenya basically run by the United Nations Environment Programme, but with the support of an integration of WHO, FAO, and WOA. So we're keen on that, being in the global south where the burden is greatest and the need is greatest. We've agreed we're going to have biennial meetings of ministers, and I hope in time, it could take 10 years, but let's hope it's faster, they turn from learning events into holding ourselves to account, almost a COP-type mechanism. The next meeting is going to be in Nigeria in 2 years' time, and I'm very grateful to Minister Pate and the government of Nigeria for agreeing to bring the ministerial to the global south. But national action plans, moving forwards, what we also need to recognize is we need a lot of innovation. We need innovation for new drugs. We need innovation for new and better, cheaper, faster diagnostics. We actually don't do surveillance enough in low and middle income countries. So we've got to move forward with innovation in every area, including in the food chain, so that fewer antibiotics are used. And finally, I'd say what was clear was the few countries that are in Europe that have global AMR ambassadors, Sweden, Germany, and I count as one, we are pushing forward and we're a good network. So I hope that other countries will join in and appoint global AMR ambassadors so we can all work together, making action happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. It's great to hear about some positivity too, that this seems like we're really seeing a lot of political commitment. We so rarely, I think, get positive news in public health, so it's always great to hear. And you touched on a lot of things that hopefully we're going to get into, from incentives, the independent panel. But I want to focus, like you said, this Saudi ministerial meeting was on moving from the commitment to the implementation. And I think this is really key and what I really want our conversation today to be focused on, because I think we're at a point where we all recognize AMR is a threat, but so what are we actually going to do about it? And I want to turn to Roser. Similar question, but looking specifically from the EU, with these UNGA commitments now that we have, with all this political will, how do we move the document from just being political will, like how do we move into implementation? What's the EU's plan to move forward on that?
Well, I would start, apart from the fact that obviously I couldn't agree more with Dame Sally, and I'm very happy to share a panel with her. Of course, for the European Commission and the European Union, AMR has been a priority for decades now. We've had several action plans. We've had the Council recommendation in 2023, and in a way, the UNGA declaration is a bit a mirroring of what we're saying at European level. In terms of how we put this forward, obviously we support member states. I would say that obviously at international level, and I agree very much, I think that Dame Sally already said a lot, in particular, because the difference between countries is huge. The conditions between all the UN member states are extremely different. Obviously, they need to adapt their national action plans. For that, they will mainly need resources, both financial and human. They will need appropriate governance, they will need organization, they will need infrastructure. For that, I agree with Dame Sally on the financing. There are, and this is a bit also the problem that we have today, is this segregation of financial sources. We need, and this is one of the issues that has been decided also in the context of the political declaration, which is the mapping of all these financing resources. One of them is the multi-partner trust fund, which actually targets the national action plans in low and middle income countries. And here we are contributing, like some member states, obviously also the UK. And I think that one of the things that we've been asking and preaching is also to enlarge this donor base for this MPTF to help, in particular, low and middle income countries. Of course, I can come more on how the EU can implement, but I don't know if this is part of this question or you want to come this later.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I think we can probably circle back to that, because you brought up money, and that leads me to Mark, actually, because Mark is here. You're the president of BEAM Alliance. You represent 70 small and medium-sized companies that will work in the field of antimicrobials, and we know that one of the main issues for companies, developers that want to contribute to research and development for new antimicrobials comes down to funding. And tell me if I'm wrong, but what are the main challenges that you're seeing? What is really hurting the pipeline? And then also, sorry, double question, from these UNGA declaration, and these various commitments that we've had recently, do you think the private sector, do you think there was enough involvement and engagement in that sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I also just came back from the ministerial meeting, and I think the line that I liked most was actually the headline, which was from a coalition of the willing to a coalition of implementation. The question is now, how are we really doing that, and what does it mean also in terms of the high-income countries? We talk a lot about on the UNGA level and so forth, and there's tremendous progress on the national action plans, on a global perspective. And please don't get me wrong at all. I think this is tremendously important, and we actually do make progress, so we have to be congratulated on that one. But I want to bring us a little bit back to reality, if I may, with a very simple example. Besides being president of the BEAM Alliance, I'm also CEO of one of these small companies. And mind you that the small companies today, and this is inadequate, so I'm talking against our own group, it is inadequate that these small companies today have more than 80% of the global new drugs that are being developed in their hands. And we're talking about small and micro companies, most of which have not even 1 year of financing in their bank account, which is for drug development that takes 15 years, a devastating situation. Now, what we see is in our clinical trials, we see in Southern Europe a lot of patients, and a significant amount of patients, that are what we call pan-drug resistant. That means we are in the year 2024, and not a single available commercial drug in the European Union works on treating the infection of the patient. Then you do a trial, and you actually see that you reduce the mortality in these patients against best available therapy significantly, by half. So you actually have something that really works. And the next step is, we have no idea how to bring that through a phase 3 and bring it to patients. Literally no idea, because the funding for the private sector is close to zero. And if it wouldn't be for the US BARDA, maybe, that's the only funding agency that currently brings something to the table, then we have nothing. So my big shout is, we also need to look at the high-income countries, and we need to make a commitment, and that is what is missing in the UNGA declaration, it is missing in the ministerial declaration, that we move to action and do something on the reimbursement. Because if we have nothing to give access to, it's totally futile to talk about access. And here I have to congratulate especially Dame Sally, of course, and she knows that, for the immense efforts that the UK has done, because it's the only country in the world that has stepped up and actually implemented a meaningful and useful reimbursement reform. And I think this is really to be congratulated, and we urgently need to have this in more high-income countries, because otherwise we're losing, and this is also well published, the last talent that actually knows how to develop new antibiotics. We should not underestimate that topic as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that insight. I think it raises different questions when it comes to bringing funding for the private sector, when it comes to what countries can do. And we'll get to the UK model a little bit later. But first, I wanted to turn to Anka real quick. Again, I want to talk about these high-level conversations that we're having, and you represent patients. So for you, I would love to know, do you think patients right now were involved enough in these conversations on AMR? Is there more that they could have been done, or was it good enough? Or if not, how can patients be more part of the discussion? What can they bring to the table when we're talking about such high-level issues like AMR?
Thank you, and it's part of the reason why I'm here, in a sense. Look, patients and civil society have been involved in some of these discussions. It is perhaps not perfect, nothing is, but the important role of patients and civil society organizations in general in AMR is to bring that sort of real life perspective of real human beings who end up with real infections in real hospitals and need real antibiotics and rely on them. Now, patients, AMR can affect anyone, a healthy or ongoing patient. Patients or people who live with chronic conditions are higher risk. They are more vulnerable because of the underlying conditions or because they are more intensive users of healthcare settings. And that increases their exposure. Patient organizations, a crucial role, I believe, is in making the link between these discussions and these solutions, and hopefully solutions, a community of implementation, community of practice, and their communities. There is a real need to step up awareness. We've seen just on Monday, ECDC released new data that shows that community use of antibiotics is again increasing. That is alarming. And I feel that patient organizations and civil society organizations, we have a real role in bringing this urgency that is at the political level, hopefully shifting towards implementation, bringing it to our communities and raising that awareness that no, it's not automatic. It really is talking to our communities. Now, there is a lot more that can be done on using what's available to prevent infections in the first place, and on promoting antibiotic stewardship in healthcare. We are also dealing with significant pressures on the healthcare workforce that can also be linked to higher prescribing. There is a lot, but what I'm saying is, okay. What I'm saying.
Everybody's excited to join the AMR conversation.
Thank you very much. What I'm saying is there is, between the political discussions, between the policy making and the people who will benefit from all of this, there's a missing link. And we can provide that missing link as a community of patients, public health organizations, and so on, to make it real so that the entire society can be part of these efforts as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and I think that's why I'm really grateful you're here with us, because I think the element of patience sometimes gets a little lost when we're talking about such high-level and global issues like AMR or climate change. So it's great to get that input and realize what's missing at this point to also communicate, because like you said, a lot of it comes down to prevention. A lot of this comes down to good use of antibiotics, which with better communication we can also work on. Great. I want to go back to Dame Sally real quick. You mentioned a lot of different things earlier that from ANGA and from the Saudi ministerial meeting are going to be next steps. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the immediate next step to take now when we're doing implementation of these commitments? I know the independent panel is probably the first thing that's going to come up, but also how quickly do we have to move when it comes to funding, when it comes to moving forward with what we committed?
Well, we can never move quickly enough, I would argue. And I absolutely agree with Anka, as my own goddaughter died 2 years ago. This is affecting all of us in rich and poor countries. And I do want to put on record that I think the Commission has done a wonderful job over the years of promoting it. So why are individual countries, both within the EU and in low and middle income countries, not really driving it forward? And it has to be because of lack of awareness, both of the issues, but also that there's a really good return on investment. So I wanted to point out that the new data shows that if we don't take care and move to action, $150 billion a year will be the cost across the globe. Yet, if we invest in new drugs, we can save 10 million people's lives, and we can really make a big difference. And if we invest in new drugs and better clean water and prevention, we'll save even more. So we, across the world, have a return of $24 for every pound invested in AMR. So it's nuts that we're not in every country moving forwards. What more can I say to really help move it forward? I've put pressure on the World Bank to really map what's going on and to look at how they can bring together all of the development banks. I've asked them to make it much easier to get the money out and available, but actually also countries have got to look at, well, what is their priority? And for some of the really poor countries, their priority is going to be not innovation, it's except for getting rid of the blocks and problems of getting routine oral, as the WHO calls them, access antibiotics into the community. And we really need to help very low-income countries do that. And we need to move forward on the food chain. So one of the things that I found really encouraging is a group of investors, I've worked with some, but 80 of them, before the high-level meeting, and made demands of government to move on this issue in the food chain and make sure growth promotion stops, make sure antimicrobial use goes down, and prevent the use of critical medically important antibiotics. But they are also publishing their guardrails for investment in the food chain. And that begins to be a bit like climate. That can really shift both consumers and the companies themselves in how they use antibiotics. So it's all hands to the deck. We've got to use everything we can, patients, consumers to raise awareness and change behavior, investors to push companies, and then countries to do their bit. I absolutely agree. We're only going to get this right when it's right at the grassroots.
Thank you. On the issue of countries getting there, like you mentioned, there is also a lot of inequalities in Europe, but in general on where countries are with their targets. You mentioned the CDC had this report already this week. Europe is also not overall on track to meet its targets. So, Rosa, I know that it's hard to handle 27 member states and to help coordinate in this, but what are some ways that you think the Commission can support countries implementing their national plans and meeting these targets? Because again, the number of antibiotic use went up from 2019 to 2023 when we're supposed to bring it down by 20% by 2030. So there's still a lot of road to go.
Yep. Okay. Well, first, in terms of the targets and the data which were published on Monday. Definitely, they are not ideal. Definitely, there are elements that have to be urgently improved. But I see that some of them have improved. The reductions on MRSA bloodstream infections went down by 17%, so already reached the target. The reduction of bloodstream infections on cephalosporin-resistant E. coli also by 3.6%. The use of access group antibiotics is higher, so not that bad as it looked like in the Politico article.
I think people love bad news too.
Yes,
so, yes.
exactly. But then there are definitely some figures that are concerning. As Anka was saying, antimicrobial consumption has increased, and also the incidence of carbapenem-resistant Klebsiella pneumonia also. And actually quite radically, even if this again can be sort of nuanced because the cases were very small. Never mind. So as I was saying, there is a big difference between member states. And in the country recommendation, for those that are familiar, we had overall targets and also proposed national targets. In order for the member states that are more struggling to reach them, we're helping them in several ways. As you probably know, there is this joint action, by the way. This is the pin. We have plenty of pins here for everyone. This is our joint action for which we're paying more than 62 million euros. It concerns all member states, plus Iceland, Norway, and Ukraine. It's designed to help member states to develop and update their action plans, to use state-of-the-art IPC. Sorry, I don't have AMR, but I have a flu. Maybe due to AMR, I don't know. So obviously we're also helping them to strengthen the responsibility of their health systems on AMR, to improve their surveillance systems in order also to get an integrated system, and of course to increase awareness, and this is something that we might come back, because for me it's the most important issue as everyone is concerned. Then we also have a One Health AMR network where we meet twice a year, all member states plus stakeholders, including colleagues sitting here, and in the 3 areas. So it's really One Health. I mean, as Dame Sally was saying, we really need to incorporate this One Health approach and exchange best practice on this basis. We provide trainings, and we have launched an awareness-raising campaign, about which we spoke on Monday as well, and I will be delighted to talk about it if you want.
Yes, thank you. Let's actually stay on that a little bit, because I think for awareness, it keeps coming back really as something that we need to focus on. And I wanted to bring up, yesterday we had the CDC director here, Pamela Rendi-Wagner. She was talking about the issue of trust too, when it comes to speaking with communities, when it comes to misinformation. And I was wondering from you, Anka, do you think right now that's also a concern when it comes to raising awareness on AMR? Is there an issue with trust? Is there a gap between public health officials or institutions and with communities?
I think that's a complicated question. I could make some assumptions, but I don't really have data on it. I could make an assumption that there might be higher antibiotic use because people get more vaccine-preventable diseases, for example, and that is indirectly also caused by misinformation and lack of trust. But these would be speculations. I don't have enough data and information to make that assumption. I do know that if we want to address AMR in the community, someone needs to speak the community, and there's no one better to do that than actual community representatives. And I won't go beyond that, really.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that still, I think, brings up a good point of, like you said, just having, yesterday we were talking about using the right language, but also having the right people talking to the community. Sounds like you're saying
absolutely.
it's important.
And here I think, again, patient and public health organizations, professionals organizations are really the closest to the community. Mm-hmm. So awareness-raising campaigns, absolutely, with community representatives.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I wanted to pivot real quick because we're about 15 minutes left. Time goes very fast when you're having fun. I wanted to move to talk back about money again, because it's come up already a few times when we need more funding. We need funding. Yes. Countries need funding for their national action plans. Companies need funding to get antimicrobials in the pipeline. so them, Sally, in the UK, you mentioned earlier the subscription model that you guys have implemented. It's been, I think people have sung its praises already, but I wanted to hear from you, what's been the feedback on this model, and how can it be an example for other countries that maybe want to implement similar ones? I know Italy has recently brought up that they are thinking of a similar pull incentive, but what advice do you have for other countries that maybe could implement something similar?
So what our subscription model does is separate the cost we're going to pay from an individual patient because of the market failure. So what we do is, and it's now across the whole of the UK, and we advertise, and then companies come in and say, I've got a drug, I want to be considered in this innovation and funded in this way. And we look at the impact on the patient in the standard health technology assessment, but then we look at the societal impact of that drug as if it were a fire extinguisher on the pharmacy shelves, as if we're saying, not only can we kill the bug that's pan-resistant in the patient, but that means we won't have to close the hospital ward, we won't have to isolate the family, it won't impact on society, and we give that a value. And then working out, based on our share of GDP from the G7, a reasonable price to pay each year over 10 years, we come to a subscription value. And actually, the companies have all liked it. I'm thrilled that when we developed this, the companies were all involved in the development, along with our National Institute for Clinical Excellence, our health economics unit up in York University, the NHS executive, and patients. Everyone was very involved in the discussions as they went through, and it seems to work. We've been trying to persuade the G7 to join in. Italy has now announced that they will spend the equivalent money in a slightly different way. Well, our health systems are different, so that's all right. Japan is trying a pilot. Sweden has a pull incentive, but it's not for innovation, it's for access. Germany similarly has a pull incentive that increases access, but not innovation. So we're going to have to work very hard. And actually, we need all the rich countries joining in and paying their share. And then perhaps we develop tiered pricing, so there's access for low and middle income countries when properly stewarded. We know it can work, and we know it will save money, but we do have problems persuading other countries to take that leap. And I think it's because the discussions often happen with health ministries, and they see this as just spending more money, whereas we see it from our finance ministry as an investment in the future of society. As I said, there's a good payback. So we need to do that. Can I pick up one other thing about money? It doesn't always need lots of money. I set up a charity in 2020, and we called the Trinity Challenge, and we've just had a youth summit on AMR and what campaigns should youth do in their local communities. And sure, we had to pay a bit to but only their costs, no more, to the communications company that worked with them, but they chose WASH, that we should really do campaigns across the world about WASH in schools. And we've given £7,000 to each of 7 projects across the world in low and middle income countries. And they're launched this week, and they are developing their programs in schools about IPC and WASH. So it doesn't need lots of money, but it needs the effort to help people understand, to train them, and then enough money to get going. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that brings us again back to prevention and to having campaigns to raise awareness in the community. So it's great to hear about this program too. On the UK subscription model, so it sounds like it's been vastly successful, it's well received. Mark, you said earlier you think it's a good program too. Can you tell us from your perspective what the other countries also need to do? How could they follow in the footsteps? Or I know you mentioned also possibly doing this even at the EU level. What is it exactly that you think companies need when it comes to pull incentives, and we can get to push too?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Look, I think the first comment I want to make is actually, when we talk about money and so forth, that we are in a situation that we all recognize the problem, etc. But I want to really also say an important topic here, that the private sector here is not the enemy. The private sector is actually critically needed to achieve our goals. It is not only for the new drugs, but we are part of stewardship. We are part of surveillance. We are part of actually delivering these drugs. And it's a remarkable achievement over the last years that the industry is really aligned with the policies, with actually the patient organizations, etc. What is now interesting is, also thanks to the UK work, but a lot of the work that has been done by different independent panels, we roughly know the amount of money that is needed for the private sector to be incentivized enough so that it's actually sustainable. It's not out of this world, really not. And as Dame Sally said, it's actually an investment that returns multiples. So for me, the surprising, and I have to admit frustrating thing is that we are taken an awful long time of discussion still, even though we have blueprints for nearly every geographic region and country on the table, knowing very well what to do. And instead of running pilots or actually implementing, we're talking, we're discussing, we're challenging, and we're losing time, we're losing talent, and we're losing products. And I find that very sad, because now on a concrete European level, we have the European pharma legislation. I will mention the bad word, it's transferable exclusivity that is on the table by the Commission. Everyone says it's a bad word. I don't think it actually is. It's a solution that potentially works for the European Union on a pan-European level. And the Commission has done a good work to assess what other solutions were there, and they found out in the European level and context, maybe nothing works in Brussels other than that solution. Is it perfect? Maybe not. Should we try it? Absolutely. Is there issues that we still should discuss together? And we're very happy and open to discuss it. Yes, there are. Access is still maybe an issue, but here we have HERA as another European Commission initiative that can actually address that. So what prevents us from implementing, trying, being a little bit brave and saying we save this important issue and actually implement, and if it doesn't work, we correct again. But I think we have to implement, otherwise we lose not only time, but actually we lose much more time than we think. We're losing the last pieces and bits that are still in place to work on the issue. So I have to stress that point, tremendously important. Please implement, go to that coalition from the willing to the implementation, and try, and be a little bit brave, because it's not always your enemy, the private sector, in that sense. So this is really a big, ask from my side to the audience and to now the European politicians and member states. Thank you.
We got an applause. You mentioned the vouchers. We mentioned this program. I'll stay with you for a second, because I'm curious if you have other ideas of things that actual incentives that would work. The vouchers might work at the EU level. What about other maybe regional programs like the UK?
So the UK model is really good. I think industry, and I want to reiterate also the selection criteria to assess drugs to go into the UK model is actually really smart and well done. It comes from a patient perspective, which I really appreciate a lot, and at the same time keeps in mind the global perspective about the priority needs from the WHO list. So this is really good. I think we see other national initiatives. For instance, the German initiative is I have to say how I really feel it. It's well meant, but totally besides the point. I'm sorry. It's just it allows kind of for a high price model, which doesn't de-link from volume. It doesn't actually help good stewardship, and it is meant for hospital drugs, but hospitals are not reimbursed, so they sit on the cost. So I don't. It's a real misincentive actually. So here I think we have so many clear proposals on the table for European level, country level, that I really demand the people responsible in that seek the discussion with the industry, with the private sector, find solutions that are win-win and workable for both sides. I think the Italian model sounds interesting. I have to admit we still need to get ourselves the real understanding, because each country healthcare system is so different that it's not so easy. We would thus advocate to make it a bit easier, make a pan-European solution, because if we have to go to each country and a company needs to also learn, adjust, and prepare documentation for each country, bear in mind that is also effort and cost. So it's not like we have to work together here. And that's why I think a pan-European solution would significantly be better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great segue for Rosa to get to. We mentioned the vouchers are in the pharmaceutical legislation, but Hera also mentioned that they were working on a revenue guarantee model. I don't know if you can tell us anything about when we can expect from there. I know you're not from here, but in terms of what the EU can do you think do you think it's realistic to envision also a EU-level pool incentive program, or do you think this is something more that should be done at the country level, and then EU helps with funding and coordination?
Well, I would repeat what Mark has just said. I mean, we have proposed this, the voucher solution, in addition, obviously, to other incentives, because in the end, we think that it's all about a bit of a toolbox and use both the push and the pull incentives, but obviously to get really innovative antibiotics, and this is the solution that we think can work best. I'm not going to repeat what Mark has just said, but I fully agree on the courage. As you probably know, this has been already discussed with the Parliament, went through the Parliament. It's a bit stuck with the Member States. So I also call here for a bit of vision by the European Member States to see that even from the side of SMEs, not only the big pharma, it is very interesting solution. Apart from the fact that in terms of funding, it doesn't involve an immediate disbursement, which is what a lot of member states fear. I don't know if this is enough, because I'm saying that it's only 2 minutes.
Yeah, we have a little timer here. Yeah, we're almost at the end. So yeah, thank you. I have one last question that I was going to ask all of you, and so I might ask you to keep it very, very quick to wrap up. And it's really looking forward to next year. I think we've had such a monumental year for AMR. We had these meetings and commitments, and then we have the next ministerial meeting in 2026. How do we make sure that next year is not just a filler year, that we move forward and keep this momentum going until we're waiting for the next milestone? And maybe I'll start with Dame Sally online, and then I'll move to each of you.
Well, I'm going to continue to battle hard in my role. I think we have to prioritize. My priorities are trying to spread pull incentives, the independent science panel, and trying to raise awareness, I suppose. But, we need pull incentives probably not just for new medicines and treatments, but actually maybe for diagnostics. We really do need to move forward on all of this. So my promise is to continue working hard. Let's hope that pays off as others join in. I think we will. Activity and noise will go down a bit next year, but if we make the panel happen and make other progress happen, then we will be all right. And we've got another high-level meeting in 2029, so we've got something to work to show that we can make a difference over this period.
Great, thank you. Anka, I'll come to you.
Yeah, my message is on awareness raising and how we can, as a community, and here, perhaps I speak on behalf of more people than I should be, but I'm pretty sure within the general civil society at European level, there's a lot of willingness to support the awareness raising efforts of the European Commission, and there is a need to continue investing in that. We will certainly be investing in that in the next year and continue to build community awareness on AMR.
Okay, thank you. Rosa?
Obviously, we're talking about the pharma legislation, so we hope that we will get our proposal through, including on the vouchers. Agree with Dame Sally on the panel and how important the panel will be to measure and to help and to assist UN member states on their progress. She was mentioning the high-level meeting in 2029. There's going to be a ministerial like the Jeddah one in 2026. It's important that we keep the momentum and the hooks to be able to publicly show support. Anka was talking about awareness. I will not have the time to talk about our campaign, but I will say something. Media are very important. What happens with AMR is what happens with health. The moment it is perceived not to be an urgency, it drops in the priorities. We have it as a priority. We have in the mission letter of the commissioner designate everything. But I know that the interest, because we no longer have COVID, we no longer have these visible things, and that's the problem with AMR, they don't see it. We need support. So we need also the media to get involved in and multiplying the measures, the message. We now have all the figures. Not only on death, we have the figures on economic loss. The investment is huge. So please keep repeating them.
I promise I'll keep writing about it. So, Mark?
I'll try to be really short. I would like to ask for leadership by example, and that means implementation, and again, implementation by G7 and EU27. We know what is to do. Please take the private sector on board. We give our commitment that we will help to solve some of the other One Health issues, to bring them also with access towards patients that need this.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone. This has been, I think, a great conversation. Thank you for joining us. Please, in the audience, remain seated. We are about to have another panel before lunch with Mary Eccles on non-communicable diseases. But otherwise, give a round of applause to our great panelists here. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, those are not, I think, the most